I see a fellow board member, Brajarani, and because I can't see. Uh, I ask all of you, um, if you don't mind, to uh, show me your lotus eyes, even if for a moment, unless you're still in bed in your pajamas, and then I'll fully understand. So, therefore, I'm assuming those who don't say hello with their video, I can safely assume they're still in bed, and I'll try not to embarrass you too much, just a little bit.
Painting their toenails.
Yes, yes. You see, you're smart, Prabhu, because you painted yours before the class. Very good thinking. Okay, now I realize some can't, but I like to see who's here. I realize you may have to turn off and cook breakfast and do other things, but at least I like to see you, if only for a moment. Uh, let's see, we got a few in the waiting room here. We'll make sure everyone's admitted. Uh, okay, so we're underway. Uh, and I understand some of you can't turn on your video, and I understand that. That's okay. We'll just assume you're painting your toenails. Um, okay, so we shall begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So, today we're in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavatam. And before we begin, was there any topic on someone's mind like they would like me to touch upon in class? It may not be always practical, it may not tie in, but it is something that's really been pressing on your mind. Feel free to bring it up, unmute yourself, or chat and tell me what was on your mind before we begin.
How wonderful is Krishna?
Ah, well, we'll get to that. Anything else on somebody's mind? Okay. Let me make sure I got the right verses here for sure. 9, 3, 23 to 29. Now, this is an odd chapter in some regards, in that some of the stories deal with issues of complexity in physics, which we'll get to, and some of the verses deal with being grouchy. Now, being grouchy is an interesting topic. Okay, we got a few good questions coming in that are relevant for the verses. Just one moment. I need to look up one other thing here. Okay. Shashamsa Pitri Tat Sarvam Vayo Rupa Balam Banam Vismita Param Pritas Tanayam Parishasvaje. So in this, just to give a context before we do the particular translation, King Saryati went and visited the ashram of Chaivana Muni. Now, Chaivana Muni was old. He was grouchy. His hair was white. His skin was baggy and hanging off him. His veins were showing. Does this describe any of you? Okay, so he had all the symptoms of old age. And when he got there, when the king got to the ashram with his beautiful daughter, she saw a glow worm, a glowing from a wormhole, and she poked it with something, curious what it was. And that was Chaivana Muni doing something quite mystical. And she even made some blood come out. So mystic yogis can sometimes assume other forms. And so the king and his entourage were cursed. Now, this is a curse that none of you ever want to get. If you've been to India, you've likely gotten this curse. Those who have been to India will experience this curse. They could not pass stool or urine. So in India, you often get two curses, either too much stool or not enough. Either way is extremely uncomfortable. And it can be very disconcerting, to say the least. So here you have a king and all his entourage, and they're just there in some kind of agony. So the king, being a smart king and understanding karma and how the world works, kings are supposed to understand that. Nowadays, they often don't. The king understood some offense has been done. And he went and he understood his duty, and he offered his daughter as a bride to the king. In those days, such things were the social custom of the time. Nowadays, such things would be considered quite unusual. But in those days, such things happened. Now, some would, when he did that, I'm sort of getting the story up to where we are. Then the king realized that his wife is not going to be very happy this way, and he's not going to be, this is an odd arrangement. And the king, then the great physicians, the Ashvini Kumaras, they're really good physicians, much better than anybody we can ever find nowadays. They visited the ashram, and Chaivana Muni said, "Make me young again." Now, sometimes we get challenged that way in our own life. Would you like to be young again? For those of us who are older. And those who are older, would you sometimes challenge, would you like to be older? Now, I'm asked that question. And I would not trade my youthful energy for if coming with it, I had to deal with my youthful stupidity. And sometimes that can happen. When I was younger, I was very fortunate. I was able to do some wise things. And I was also able to demonstrate that there really is a God. Now, how could I demonstrate there's really a God? I can show you because I'm speaking to you right now. Because if I think of all the dumb, dangerous things I did as a youth, and I'm still alive, there must be a God. Otherwise, it couldn't explain it. So, but Jaivana Muni realized he was a really big grouch. Now, sometimes old people get grouchy. Can anybody think of somebody we all know, everyone on this call knows, who when he got old, got sometimes grouchy? Can anybody think of somebody like that? If so, tell me who that might be. Somebody you all know. So I gave a good hint. Who do you know that when he got old, sometimes got a little grouchy? Anybody? Somebody help me out. You all know this person. That's a hint.
Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, Prabhupada. He would sometimes be grouchy. One time he asked Bhakti Charu Swami, he said to him, bring me some orange juice. Well, in India, it's not so simple a matter. So by the time he got the orange juice, he walked in. You have to go to the market, get the oranges, etc. Prabhupada said, too late. I don't want it anymore. And Bhakti Charu Swami, extremely sensitive person. So Bhakti Charu Swami just stood there. Prabhupada said, too late. I don't want it anymore. And still Bhakti Charu Swami just stood there. Finally, Prabhupada took it. And later on, Prabhupada rang the bell and said, oh, don't worry. Old men get grouchy. That story is very significant. Jagadish tells a similar story. I don't think this has been published, but he told me the story. One time he was with Prabhupada as a servant, and Prabhupada said, I want you to move my bed from one end of the room to the other. And Jagadish says, I'll get someone to help. And Prabhupada said, no, just do it yourself. So then Prabhupada goes into his office, and Jagadish is dragging the bed. He's alone and is making all these squeaking noises. And Prabhupada rings a bell. Why are you disturbing me so much? And later on, Prabhupada rang the bell, and Jagadish went back. Yes, Prabhupada. He said, don't worry, old men get grouchy. So it's just the nature of things. Prabhupada was very funny that way. Now, Prabhupada wasn't like an ordinary old man who just hurt people and was mean, but sometimes older people can exhibit a certain grouchiness. I can speak from experience. And sometimes young people can exhibit an overenthusiasm. Just certain things go with certain ages. Now, in this case, though, it kind of got interesting in that Jaivana Muni had this nice wife, and he's thinking, I don't have a suitable body. And he told the Ashva Kumaris, make me young again, make me young again. So they took him to this mystical lake, and he went in it, and they all went in. And when they came out, they all had these beautiful, youthful bodies, as beautiful and as glowing as a young man's body could be. And Jaivana Muni's poor wife was like bewildered. Oh, where's my husband? I have no husband anymore. She couldn't find him. She was very loyal woman. She wasn't going to go with another man, even if he was beautiful and young. So she was very disturbed. Finally, the Ashva Kumari said, no, this is your husband, and this is who he is. And Sukayana could not distinguish her husband from the two Ashvini Kumaris, for they were equally beautiful. Not understanding who her real husband was, she took shelter of the Ashvini Kumaras. They were pleased to see Sukayana's chastity. chastity, because she didn't try to say, oh, which one's the most beautiful guy? That's who I want now. The old man, forget him. They showed her Chaivana Muni, and after taking permission from him, Chaivana Muni, they returned to their heavenly planets in their celestial airplanes. So this is kind of the background. So the king then showed up, and when he saw his daughter by the side of a beautiful young man, as bright as the sun, he was, to say the least, upset. You got married. You had a nice husband, a little old and ornery and gray and wrinkled. But, I've taught you from the beginning, don't be in the bodily concept. And this was your duty. This is who you had. How could you do this? Oh, unchaste girl, why is it you have desired? What is this you've desired to do? You have cheated your most respectable husband, who is honored by everyone. For I see he was old, diseased, and therefore unattractive. You have left his company to accept a young man. Ooh, how horrible. Oh, my daughter, you were born in a respectable family. How have you degraded your consciousness way? How is it that you are shamelessly maintaining a paramour? This was quite embarrassing to him. He said, my family will be dishonored. Everyone will be dishonored. I asked you to marry this man. You agreed. Now you've gone back on your word. Oh, horrible, horrible of horrors. So then Sukanya explained, our husband received a beautiful body. When the king heard this, he was very surprised, and in great pleasure, he embraced his beloved daughter. Chaivana Muni, by his own prowess, enabled King Saryati to perform the Soma Yagna, and they had Soma Yagna. It's a really nice drink. I don't recommend in this age we try to find it. When I was young, we were looking for the Soma Rasa. We called it LSD, marijuana, hashish. We were looking for the Soma Rasa. Turns out it didn't work very well because it's not Soma Rasa. It's just illusory energy. So now Soma Rasa is reserved for people from heavenly planets. King Indra was very upset by this. King Indra was kind of short-tempered. We can see this when we study the demigods in other cultures. What is King Indra called in other cultures? Can somebody help me out?
Zeus?
Zeus?
God of heaven.
Say again?
God of heaven.
Yeah, but another name. In Norway, what do you call Indra?
Is it Thor?
Yes, Thor. If you read any of the mythology books, you'll find descriptions that appear very similar to Indra. Very powerful, has some kind of mystical weapon similar to a thunderbolt, and can get grouchy very easily. So the characteristics are quite universal. When I read about Indra in India, I said, gee, I've met him before. I know who he is. I've seen him around. And of course, I had studied mythology in college, and it became clear that Thor, Indra, Zeus, like this, we're talking about the same person from a different angle. So Indra got really upset, and he wanted to kill Chaivana Muni. That's pretty upset. But and Indra took his thunderbolt in his hand, was ready to throw it. Chaivana Muni was very powerful. So just by a mystic process, he froze Indra's arm. Some of you may have had frozen shoulder. Then you have to get a surgery even can happen. When you get frozen shoulder, your arm's stuck and you can't move it. So similarly, Indra ended up with a really bad case of frozen shoulder, 100% frozen. And he was upset because not only did Chaitanya Muni have the Somarasa, he gave it to the Ashvini Kumaras, who according to the rankings in heaven were not entitled to it. And he gave it to him. So he was very upset. So then the story goes on. King Saryati had some more sons. And then there's, I'm going to pause here just for a few questions. That why did Indra get upset? Well, Indra's the king of heaven, and there are rules, and he felt Chaitanya Muni was violating the rules because somehow by the social rankings, Ashvini Kumaras weren't entitled. Now, many societies have social rules. It's a common phenomena, and social rules sometimes are necessary to keep order in society. Yet when these rules become too stiff, they ruin society. For example, the Bhagavatam begins with a great condemnation of the caste system. Can somebody tell me how the Bhagavatam, in its very, very beginning, condemns the caste system? Can somebody tell me how it does that? When I lived in India, before I was a devotee, I was a high school teacher in India. And I was in a state that was very, very backwards and extremely caste conscious. And I observed this process. I was actually horrified by it. That you're born something and you are stuck with your birthright, no matter what your qualifications. Because I had read the Gita, and the Gita had said, hey, your varna is determined by your guna and karma, by your actions and your qualities, not by birth. Never said the word janma, birth. And I was in India, I was horrified by it. State I live extremely backwards. To this date, there's still caste wars all the time. So how does the Bhagavatam in its very first canto condemn the caste system? Can somebody remind me?
Shringi cursing.
Shringi cursed who?
Maharaj Parikshit.
He cursed Parikshit. He was the unqualified son of a Brahmin, and therefore he claimed to be a Brahmin just by birthright, very unqualified. So the whole Bhagavatam, sometimes we get criticized, oh, your tradition comes from India, they have the caste system. Well, the most important scripture in all of India, the Srimad Bhagavatam, begins with a condemnation of the caste system, a very dramatic one. But these things happen. So Indra was kind of, why did he get upset? He had a little bit of caste consciousness. Ashvini Kumaras, they weren't quite a member of the right group. A little bit of that, even though they were qualified and everything. He said, when I grew up in New Jersey. Now, many of you are in New Jersey or right next to New Jersey. When I grew up, we used to say New Jersey is the light at the end of the tunnel, the Holland and Lincoln tunnels. So I lived right behind my house was a golf course, a very famous golf course called Baltusrol Golf Course. They even have the US Open there. This was in the 50s. And at that time, my town I lived in was half Catholic and basically 2/3 Catholic and Jewish. And the only people that could play at the golf course were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. The nickname for them is WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. No one else was allowed to play at the golf course, even though the town was mostly Jews and Catholics, and everyone accepted it. No one fought it. It was just how things were. It kind of shocked me. And I used to, as a kid, go and vandalize the golf course as my revenge. But it was just the accepted way things were. People didn't protest it. Yeah, that's how things were. It was kind of that caste consciousness. In the same mood of Chaivana Muni, I thought there was something wrong with it. So I would sneak into the golf course and fill up the holes with sand and watch the golfers hit the ball and roll right over the hole, or they hit a ball in a fairway and I'd crawl out and throw it in a sand trap. Do all kinds of things because it just seemed wrong to me. I don't know where that came from, but it was very, very accepted. I never heard my parents or my neighbor, who was one of the leading Catholic politicians, ever protest that. It was considered kind of how society was. So somehow Indra considered that's how society is. And he didn't like that Chaivana Muni challenged the status quo as unnecessary. Chaivana Muni, in this sense, was kind of like a modern reformer. So Indra got upset because he didn't like it, and Chaivana Muni put Indra in place. We have a history of Indra getting upset and getting put in place. Like, of course, the most famous story is with Krishna and Govardhan Hill, and we have Lord Brahma with the cows, and many stories like this. So we sometimes find in the Bhagavatam of kind of remnants of casteism. And when it comes up, we find that the person who's promulgating that casteism always gets smashed. Sometimes people get down, well, in this culture 5,000 years ago, there was still casteism. It wasn't a very good culture. Well, every time casteism shows up, it gets smashed. That's the point. We find hunters in the Bhagavatam, and every time you find a hunter, they get smashed. That's the point. They get smashed. Why they get smashed? Because they're supposed to get smashed, because it's wrong. But it's a natural tendency for us to claim a birthright. It's part of our false ego process to claim that because I am born in this particular family. We go to India now. We have a resurgence of Hindutva. I am born in this Hindu family. I am better. And then before that, I was born in a Muslim family, and you Hindus are not so good. And if we go to Israel, we find if you look at Israelis and Palestinians and you line them up and you put the same clothes on them, you can't tell them apart because genetically they're first cousins. They're all related. They're all Semitic people, and they look alike. And they have many of the same, they eat the same thing. Jews don't eat pork. Muslims don't eat pork. They're basically first cousins. But they get caught up in this terribly bodily concept, and they end up in a birthright. I'm born this way. I am better than you. So this is the disease of society, and it happens all the time. So that's the question. Why did Indra get upset? Because he got caught up in a bodily concept. And somebody else asked here in relation to Chaivana Muni, what is the duty of female bodies versus male bodies in Krishna consciousness? Well, that question has no controversy associated with it. Okay, anyway, what is the duty? This is a very important question, relevant for what we're talking about. It fits in with the verse, and I was hoping nobody would ask it. You can't always get what you want. What is the duty? You guys are driving me to drink with this question. The duty of we each have a duty based on our body. For example, Arjuna had the duty of a warrior. Somebody else has the duty of a merchant or farmer. We have a duty kind of born of our nature. Yet there's always exceptions. Here's how Prabhupada dealt with this particular issue. In his purports, he talks about the cultural duties as he was brought up in, as he observed in his own families. At the same time, when specific issues came up, he did not exhibit any particular prejudice against any particular gender. And I've been studying this. I'm the mediator on the issue the GBC is dealing with on Vaishnavi Diksha gurus. And so I've studied this in quite some detail. And we find over and over and over again, Prabhupada said, when somebody is a Vaishnav, it's above any bodily concept. Sometimes there's natural duties. For example, if some miscreant would attack my house, I would expect that I would stand in front of my wife and fight him off rather than my wife standing in front of me, because most men are stronger than most women just by physical nature. Now, some women are quite a bit stronger than me, and I might be very happy if they were standing in front of me if the miscreant came. And I might have to swallow my male pride and accept it. I'll be much better protected that way. That's okay with me. That's perfectly fine. But in most cases, we would expect the man, because men generally, not always, have upper body strength better than women. If I take 100 women and 100 men, and I put them in a tug of war with a rope, I can tell you who will win. The men are going to win. If I take me against any of you ladies, I can't say who's going to win or lose. Some of you ladies must be much stronger than me, and you may win. So there's a general rule, and then there's specific circumstances. So Prabhupada would sometimes speak in terms of the general rule, what he observed, and especially what he observed in his Bengali society. And then when it came down to specific circumstances, Prabhupada said there is no distinction, and he would offer the same services to men or women. I'll give you an example that will put this in context. If we go to most temples in India, and all the temples in the Western world, we'll find that women are for artik. They dress the deities, and they do the same thing the men do, or some things the men don't do because they do it better. But if we go to Vrindavan and a few temples in India, we never find women on the altar. Now that is a curiosity. Why is it that way? Anybody know why that is?
Was that from the point of view of acceptability by the local Brajabasis and Mayapur Dhamvasis? Is that why Prabhupada made an exception in those temples of his?
Yeah. And it was not only was that, thank you, my friend Yasoda, I appreciate. Not only was that the reason, but Prabhupada was very specific about it. He was even apologetic. I'm sorry, somebody like Yamuna, I don't have you do it. But the local customs are such that in those societies, they had a lot of trouble accepting even dancing white elephants, as Prabhupada referred to us. We weren't very cultured. I remember when I first went to India, some devotees with me, and they said, let's go to Radhakund. I'm glad I didn't go, because they went there and they saw a bathing ghat, and the first thing they do is jump into it feet first. You don't jump into Radhakund feet first. You take the water, you touch it to your head, you do your prayers and rituals, then you enter the holiest bathing place in all of India. But they jump in feet first like it's a swimming pool. And the locals are horrified by that. Just like sometimes I give a trite example. I'm traveling and I go into the restroom and I see other people going into the restroom, even going into the toilet stall for men, so we know what they're doing in there. And they walk out and they don't even wash their hands. So they pass stool and they leaving the stall. And they don't even think to wash their hands. I'm horrified by it. I'm absolutely horrified. Now other people, oh, so what? I'm watching this. I'm thinking, I don't want to touch the doorknob or anything near them. Forget COVID. I mean, it's just, I'm horrified when I see such things. And I see it whenever I travel. So in a similar way, when we weren't very cultured, we made many cultural mistakes. I'll give an example. That's one that everyone who's been to India can relate to. When we're in Vrindavan, and especially we're a Western person, and we take a rickshaw, the normal price is 1 rupee. The price they charge us is 10 rupees. So then we bargain and we pay 5 rupees and we feel we had a huge victory. The normal price is 1 rupee. So this is what it's like. So I've seen some devotees go there and the rickshawwala is telling them 10 rupees and they start yelling at the rickshawwala, yelling at them, screaming and cursing them. No, it's just their culture. They just bargain. If anybody's seen the Monty Python Life of Brian, they know the bargaining scene that occurred in there. Well, that's just how it is. You just bargain. It's just how things are. And when they rip me off, I just give a big smile. And I just say, too much, I can't pay. And I just smile. And eventually I'll pay 4 rupees and they're happy, I'm happy. But you never yell at a Brajabasi. You don't do that. But we're uncultured. So Prabhupada understood that we had some cultural flaws. And the people would be noticing it. If Prabhupada put women on the altar, there'd be so much criticism, it would take away from Prabhupada's preaching mission. So he apologetically said, due to local custom, better we just not do this. But my women disciples are Vaishnavis and there is no distinction. That's how Prabhupada said it. So the women have a different nature. To some degree they do, and we accept that nature. But any individual woman, like for example, our president of our biggest temple in Europe, Bhaktivedanta Manor, is one of the most qualified temple presidents on the planet, Vishaka. Our president of the largest community in America, maybe the Western world, Alachua, Mukhya, very qualified woman. So in fact, the 2 best temple presidents we had at New Ramanreti, both of them happened to have been women. So Prabhupada's main point was, whatever you do it for Krishna. And if you're qualified, it's fine. At the same time, there are sometimes for cultural circumstances, we adopt the local culture in order to make it the point of our preaching, not the point that we're culturally defiant. And then we do have somewhat different natures, men and women. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Of course, that book's mostly been discredited, but the concept of it, that there are differences, has some validity. So we accept there are some differences, but ultimately it's the spiritual principles that count. So it's kind of a Chinta Beta Beta Tattva. I hope that answered that question. And now I noticed I've been going on and we're running out of time. Now that was interesting because the next verse was going to talk about time and how time moves at a very different rate on Lord Brahma's planet than it does on our planet. And it's a story of Balaram marrying Revati. But there's no time for that story today because I am on the earthly planet, not Brahma's planet, where time would be different. And I was going to talk about the relativity of time and what time looks like in the spiritual world. But that will have to wait to another class. At that point, I will stop here and see if there are any final questions, comments, reflections, criticism or funny things to say? Any questions? We'll give a moment here. See, I'll check my chat. Okay, nothing in the chat. With that, I think it is almost time to greet the deities.
Brahmatirtha Prabhu,
Yes.
it's
Yes,
Yashoda,
Yashoda.
even though I'm calling from the phone that Shivarika's at. But yeah, this was a typical Brahmatirtha class, very grounded and very much rooted in what Prabhupada says. And these classes are really nourishing and important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's just Prabhupada's mercy. When I met Prabhupada, he did something. I'd met other so-called sadhus in India, and I was in India. I went to India as a teacher to really search out what was behind the Bhagavad Gita. And I met Prabhupada. What impressed me is he didn't judge me. He really began, who are you? Where are you at? And what can I do for you? And it was quite impressive. Didn't matter if I was white or brown or young or old. And when I watched Prabhupada deal with people, it didn't matter. He saw each person as a spirit soul. This is called in the Gita a vision of sama, same, darshana vision, equal vision. I was listening to a wonderful class Radhanath Swami gave at the Bhakti Center on Saturday. And in it, someone asked a curious question. I didn't see who asked, but the question was like this. Person obviously was some kind of minority. Sometimes I am discriminated against. And of course, when I go to India, I'm the minority, and I go to a place like Jagannath Puri, I get discriminated against. So it can apply. Here, I'm the majority. Other places, I'll be the minority. But in this case, I'm in America, I'm discriminated against. And what did how did Radhanath Swami respond to that? A very similar way. When Bhaktitirtha Swami went to Prabhupada, said, Prabhupada, sometimes people in the movement are discriminating against blacks because he was African American. They're discriminating. And Prabhupada said two things. He said, one, that's their Maya to be in a bodily concept. And it's your Maya to take it personally. And Radhanath Swami continued that theme in a very insightful manner. He says, when somebody is discriminating against you, it means they are very hurt. They're very insecure. Because I want to be better than you by my bodily concept. That means I'm very insecure. I have no idea of my spiritual identity. So Radhanath Swami said, you see people like that as have some empathy. Oh, they're attacking me because they're so insecure. They're so stuck in their ways. Kind of feel some sorry for them. I'm paraphrasing what he said. So if somebody is stuck in the bodily concept, it's a sad place for them to be. And I hope when I get stuck sometimes in my bodily concept, people look at me that way. Oh, Brahma, he's got a little stuck in his bodily concept there. Look at that. So that can happen. So with that, we'll stop here at 8:03. I thank you very much. I hope everyone has a good day and that you have the blessing of all day, somehow or other, you can remember that you're never, never alone. In this particular COVID time, there is an extreme plague of loneliness. People are stuck, they're isolated, their social interactions are less. And in this time is a time when we can actually realize, take a deep breath, pause, sit, stop, and realize that Krishna's in our heart. And if we do our meditations, usually it's our japa mala, but whatever our meditations are, and we really pause for a moment, realize I am not even close to being alone. Krishna is with me. And this happiness and contentment will pour out of every pore in our body. So in COVID times, it's a wonderful opportunity to rise above our the loneliness that all of us have. Existential loneliness because we're disconnected from Krishna, but we're so busy. We have our iPhones and iPads and I this and then we have the biggest I of it all, our I ego. And we have all the I's in our life in which we are so overwhelmed with busyness that we forget who we really are. And as we're overwhelmed with this busyness and we completely forget who we are, we start becoming sad and lonely because our nature isn't like that. Our nature is to have relationships. And sometimes in COVID, our relationships are even very difficult. Social media is probably the worst way to communicate, I find. And so what do? It's our time to remember that we actually are with Krishna, and it's the opportunity for us to actually think of who we are and get past the existential loneliness that when we do feel it, it's the golden opportunity to increase our consciousness. So I ask you all for the blessings from all of you that I could overcome today my existential loneliness, and the same for you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for a wonderful class. It
Thank
really
you.
inspires us.
Very good.
Prabhuji, thank you so much. Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.